Hello everybody, welcome back. Today's video, I wanted to primarily go back to a previous topic in which I had discussed how popularity had changed Genshin Impact, Blue Archive, and Arknights. I would like to revisit this topic now as it's been a couple months and it's in 2023 obviously. But also, considering I played these games, interacted with the respective communities to some degree, I want to reevaluate my opinions on each and every one of them. Which ones do I think are the most popular, how I think it's affected them long term, not just in terms of the game's actual monetary success, but also its development and the community development, and give a more finalized thought on each and every one of them. Keeping this in mind, I've played a couple other gacha games. If you watched my gacha games in a nutshell video, you know that Azure Lane has been included in that. And with the ever-releasing amount of gacha games, I've also popped here and there into games like Honkai Impact, Eversoul, and so on. But I don't feel comfortable enough with each of those games to properly give them a long-term opinion, especially with games like Eversoul, which are very recently released. So, with that being said, let's talk. Genshin Impact is the most popular and most well-known game on this list. It might not be the newest, but it certainly has the most long-term changes and developments, not only to the game itself, but also to other games around it. I think that on a basic standpoint, if you were an individual who played Honkai Impact or any other Hoyoverse game, I personally don't know what other games there are, then the community that you may have had then, prior to Genshin Impact, probably changed drastically once people got into Genshin and then subsequently tried to explore other games made by the same publisher. And for me, I've been playing this game since the beginning. I've watched how it slowly changed here and there, and I do think ultimately the game itself is pretty good. I don't think the game foundationally, or in terms of how it fundamentally operates, has changed for the better or for worse. It's added new features, it's improved here and there, but it hasn't drastically shifted due to the community demands. I think one of the bigger issues Genshin Impact long-term has run into is that a vast majority of the player base, at least at first, weren't used to gacha games. For me, it was my first gacha game, and I wasn't used to it. I was an individual who had never bought microtransactions in a game. I hadn't really ever played mobile games. So getting into Genshin, I was like, oh, this looks cool, and there was ultimately nothing else around. Remember, it was during the pandemic, or at least towards the early days of it. So I think that situation also helped it spike in popularity. But the amount of individuals who weren't used to gacha games and weren't used to the way they monetize themselves and how characters are designed, especially in certain aspects, did kind of serve as a detriment to the overall game's community point, or at least how it's viewed in an outside perspective. I played Blue Archive, I played Arknights, I played Azure Lane, and so on, and usually in those games, regardless of who you choose to personally simp for, nobody cares. Like, legitimately nobody cares, but Genshin Impact has a community that really despises if you simp for certain units. For instance, Blue Archive, nobody cares who you like. Honestly, people will probably like the same character as you, let's be honest here. I haven't really seen anybody say, no, we all mutually just hate this one unit. Except maybe Amy or Izumi, but that's just because no one uses her. But with Arknights, you can like Suzerain, you can like Myrtle, you can like Mizuki, and nobody really cares. And for the most part, a lot of individuals will probably agree to some extent, or just brush you off. But with Genshin, if you like somebody like Klee, Nahida, Sayu, Diona, Fischl, you could like Bennett, any character that isn't explicitly stated to be over 6,000 years old like Zhongli, and individuals usually take a bit of an issue with that. And I think that this, alongside all the other issues, such as the fact that when the anniversary first came around, individuals review bombed other gacha games, or the concept that individuals would consistently complain about resin or about the monetization structure of the game, alongside lighter issues here and there, such as the fact that the community at one point at least complained about the skin tone of certain characters. It's led to the reputation of the Genshin Impact community slowly dragging downhill. And I think that as long as you can at least find the community that you personally agree with, or a community that you like, it's fine, but it's just getting there in the first place, which is why you should join my Discord community, linked in the description down below. Now, to clarify, if you watch my rants, I don't care about the skin tone of certain units. I don't care about a lot of things certain units. I don't care who you simp for as long as you're having fun. And to clarify along with this fact, I'm black. So I can perfectly reasonably say I don't care about the skin tone. But overall, for me, Genshin Impact is the gacha game I've stuck with the longest, and it's the one I'm most inclined to stick to long term. It's still my favorite one out of all the ones here. I adore the world, the music, the characters, and all. So I personally think it's the best overall, but it has arguably one of the worst communities. And not to say that the vast majority of the community is bad, to say that instead the community is so large that the part of it that's negative overshadows a lot of the negative aspects, or in some cases the entirety of another gacha games community as a whole. So that's my opinion on Genshin. Overall, I'd say it's a fun game. If you haven't played it, play it. I think it's actually pretty good, but if you don't like it and don't feel like dealing with the community, hey, that's fair. Next. I think it's important to preface this by saying that Arknights is a game that I've ranted on previously. If you've seen this channel, even scroll through, you've seen a couple rants here and there. If you've watched the Nut Show videos or the shorts, you know I've ranted to a degree about this game. I play Arknights here and there. I played it a lot more earlier on when I covered it, and then I dropped it. And basically, I haven't touched this game in about a week-ish now. So I don't have a desire to play it. I am not doing a full-fledged review. There's a separate video on that. I might come back to it later on. But ultimately, I think Arknights is a fine game. I think the community is iffy, depending on where you go and who you ask. You may find larger creators who have issues with it. You may find a lot of the larger gacha game creators, content creators now, at least have covered it in the past. I think that Arknights has a good reputation for the consistency and quality of the game itself, but I think to a degree that reputation works to its detriment. Similar to a game like Honkai Impact, Arknights is talked a lot about for its quality, for its story, and for its characters. The problem is that because it's so good and because people talk so highly about it, individuals may walk in with a higher expectation on the game as a whole and ultimately be disappointed. A couple people who have started Arknights and maybe dropped it usually attributed that to either the community itself bringing their opinion downwards or them walking in with different expectations than what were met. I like certain characters. Golden Glow, for instance, is adorable to me. Mizuki is great. Arknights makes really good thumbnails. I'm not gonna lie. But the gameplay aspect to me, it's fine. But I think how popularity has impacted it isn't necessarily a bad thing. The community has grown. The community itself is very helpful to newcomers. They have a lot of information. They have a lot of knowledge available to you. And they're very willing to assist and guide newer individuals into the game. From the few individuals who have asked here and there, as well as my own observations, one of the issues is Arknights doesn't necessarily play well with other games. As in, the community itself is arguably a bit more aggressive with others, but that may just be the small segments I've seen. I don't think as of yet any of the three games have heavily been impacted in terms of development by their popularity. Instead, I think it's the community that we're focusing much more heavily on how that's changed. I think Arknights out of all these games has probably one of the better communities, or at least their reputation does. But in terms of community interaction, I don't quite know. In all honesty, for me and for the interactions I've had more negative interactions with the Arknights community than I've had with the Genshin Impact community. And these are personal interactions. These aren't interactions I've had due to videos or anything like that, just to clarify. But with that being said, we're going to move on to the final game here. Blue Archive, it's the game that spawned my channel. It's the game I still play actively. I don't play as actively as Genshin, but instead I focus much more on the characters. I enjoy the designs. I enjoy the world itself. I enjoy the music. It's very fun. The popularity of Blue Archive has been great. The growth it's seen over time, the more individuals who got into it and played it, whether that be via content creators on YouTube or on Twitch, or individuals who just casually picked it up and decided to join the Discord server or my Discord server, they're great. I think Blue Archive, arguably to me, has one of the better communities, or the best one. Not necessarily because everybody's super knowledgeable, but instead because the community centers around very simple ideas, such as, hey, we all like this one character. We all think they're cute. I would love to be able to say the words that individuals usually attribute to Blue Archive, but unfortunately, YouTube's new guidelines don't like me. So with that being said, you all recognize the emoji. But in that same vein, I think Blue Archive's community is really supportive, not necessarily just about units in general, but instead towards the new people and towards anyone in the game. There's not necessarily a hard meta individuals are pushed to follow. Instead, it's much more of a game that people pick up, build who they want, and that's it. I built Tazuna, she's max invested, my Azusa sitting in a corner unused. I have barely invested into my Akko. I don't use a lot of the units that are really good. Instead, if I think they're cute and I like the relationship storyline, they're built up, and that's just that. I think Blue Archive to me is probably one of the kind of casual games to pick up and probably one of the best ones to keep long term, because you can pick it up, you can get one character you really like, do the whole relationship storyline, and that's it. Because from what I've experienced, you don't gain much from pushing super heavily into more difficult content or to more difficult areas of events, so you don't need to. And I think overall this makes Blue Archive one of the most accessible gacha games with a very, very nice community to get into. But that's my opinion on all these. If you enjoyed, have your own thoughts, or maybe disagree, hey, leave it in the comment section down below. At the end of the day, I think popularity and growth for all these games has been very good. I just think the communities in turn have been heavily impacted. Blue Archive has the better but smaller community. Arknights has the middling one. Genshin has the largest, but thereby also to an extent the worst reputation and some of the more public, the bad interactions. Either way, play what you want, enjoy your game. I'm dropping Arknights. I'm not gonna lie there. I'm not having fun. I'm not gonna play it and continue it, but I may revisit my reviews and just finalize my thoughts before moving on in like later on this month. But hey, if you enjoyed, leave a like down below, consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time. Bye.